Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled "Snob Neighbor Ripped Out the Property Boundary Fence Posts to Expand His Land. I Taught Him a Lesson." I have the kind of neighbor that thinks he walks on water and is better than everyone else in the neighborhood. Personally, I know that it should not bother me how other people are, but I'm not a perfect person and get very irked by that mindset. In addition to being a huge narcissist, he also ended up having the largest piece of property out of everyone else. Now, I moved in next to him, so I did not really think much of this, and I learned quickly that I wanted nothing to do with this guy. He did not say anything offensive or wrong, he was just a snob that would not stop bragging. When I first moved in, I made the mistake of trying to be a friendly neighbor to him and starting up conversations. They quickly turned into him just talking about how many amazing things he has and the new car that he got. He would talk about how important he was at his job and how he was an amazing golfer. Basically, this guy only wanted to talk to people in order to talk about himself instead of having a conversation. Talking to him was really annoying, and I'm sure everyone would excuse me for the fact that I avoided him. After that, I gave up trying to be a nice and friendly neighbor. I was to my other neighbors though, who were nice people, and I could safely say good morning to. I wish the story could be about how those neighbors are awesome, but I need to shift the focus back to what evil neighbor was doing. The thing he would talk about the most was how much land he had compared to everyone else. He seemed just really proud of his land, and nobody saw it as a big deal except for him. One day he decided that his amazing backyard needed something special, so he dug the entire thing up and decided to cover it. I don't know the technical term for what he did because he did not pave it like a driveway, and he kind of covered it in like tiles almost. So maybe a version of paving that would make him look fancier than he actually was. My main thought during this entire thing was that if he had so much money, why was he doing this back-breaking work himself, since he was the type to consider stuff like that beneath him? I know it might sound a little messed up, but it was fun secretly watching him like the total opposite of what he tried to show off. However, back to what he was doing, I did not mind it since it was his land after all. I moved inside to do some work and my office window faces that side of the house where I share a border with the neighbor. I know that in most areas fencing is something at the discretion of the personal owners, but here it is a little different. There are post fences that are identical for everyone's property, and my guess it is to make the neighborhood look nicer. Neighbor thought that I could not see him when he started to slowly take out the posts one by one. I was intrigued and focused on what he was doing to see that with each post he took a couple of steps towards my land and hammered the posts back in. I finally realized that his land might not all be his, and this is how he was making it bigger. I ran outside to stop him before he could place anything on what was my property. Me? Stop! You cannot just move the posts to give yourself more land. There are property lines for a reason, and this is part of my backyard. Neighbor, you stay the hell out of my business. You just move in and think that you know everything and get into my business? I've been here a lot longer than you and know more. I suggest you go back in your house before I make you look even more a fool. Me? I'm telling you right now that if you don't move the posts back or if you pave my land, you are going to be the fool. I went back inside and obviously my threat fell on deaf ears. He kept the posts where he moved them and paved the area, now making his property larger. He wanted the room there to park his new car and also some type of scooter cart that he owned. He thought that he won, but actually I was just waiting for the right moment. I found out that he goes on a month-long trip every summer, and as soon as he left I called the town to let them know what was going on. They came out and saw that he had done this on all three sides of the property and was way over the lines that were his property. They wanted to move everything back and gave him a week to do so himself. His car and cart were on what was technically my land, and I made sure those got towed. After a week with no response, they dug up all the tiles themselves and moved the posts back where they were supposed to be. This time they used some cement to make them harder to move, and I overheard them talking about slowly doing that around the whole neighborhood to be safe. Now his yard was the normal size and his wonderful car was towed. That was not everything, since the town was not happy by the stunt he pulled and the fact that he was not able to respond. Nobody was going to call and warn this guy due to everyone hating his guts. His store gets filled with notices and he got some major fines in the mail. First, he got fined for what he did, which I consider the base, and then for all those days he did not respond to the town, he got fined as well. Then the town charged him for the workers needed to tear up his pavement and reset the posts. Finally, he had to pay for all those days his car was impounded. He came back from his vacation and was shocked at the messages on his door and the fact that his yard was now a fraction of what it used to be. He had been inching the posts a little bit over a long period of time, so it was less noticeable. At the end, he had to pay about $70,000 and I never did see that car of his again. My guess was he had to sell it to pay the town for all of that trouble. I smile whenever I see him now and he looks away and walks. Although he has no proof, he knows that I was the one that called the town and I don't mind that he knows. I told him that if he did not stop what he was doing, I was gonna make him look like a fool. It was his fault for not believing me, and now he learned that if I say something, it will happen. Now he gets to be average like the rest of us instead of the rich snob he pretended he was. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you still enjoy the stories about crazy entitled neighbors, then I would really appreciate it if you could also post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is a neighbor story from r/AskReddit. My neighbors are not nearly as bad as some of these are, and I'm sure we will have worse experiences eventually in the coming years, but this is the first year living on our own, renting out a place. We moved in last August, kids were outside exploring the new neighborhood. They met the neighbor kids, a brother and sister, 2 houses down, and played with them for 2 days before the boy tried setting our house on fire. The previous tenant had used the space under the double wide as a crawl space and storage area, so the back skirting was pulled open. The kids managed to get under the house and go through the stuff and apparently found lighters. I came out of the shower to smelling smoke and ran around back to see stuff on fire and was able to put it out. They also like to come onto our porch and into our yard and take literally any kind of toy that was left outside. The kicker was when their mom came over to introduce herself within the same week and I had brought up the behavior gently to her. Her demeanor changed so fast and she literally cussed out her son in front of me and told me it was not the first time that he set stuff on fire and that he practically burned an entire barn down not too long ago. 5 minutes later, after they left, her daughter comes back and says they are not allowed to play with my kids because their mom told them my kids were bad influences. My kids knew not to play with them anymore, but the following months those kids would practically instigate stuff with mine, and they used horrible language, threw rocks at my van, and teased our dog whenever she was outside on her lead, and there were a couple of times where I ended up getting into it with their mother for talking crap to my kids and throwing my hair up, telling her to come settle it in the street. Which, by the way, she never did. I even got into it with her father once. He was like a live-in babysitter for chasing my kids down the road over a tiny Nerf gun that did not even belong to his grandkids. His justification was, "I did not think there were any adults home." That alone set me off. I'm honestly surprised the cops were not called on the simple fact that I had lost my temper with him and was screaming like a maniac because I was pissed over the fact this grown-ass man had chased my kid threateningly to the point that my kid came inside having a full-on panic attack thinking he was going to get taken by this guy. They moved a few months ago, thank God. She would always piss me off too, because she'd always justify her son's behavior in the neighborhood Facebook group with the fact that he is supposedly autistic, and anytime something happened with any kids, she would immediately put my kids' names out there to blame. 99% of the time my kids were not even or in outside the area of the incident. My kid has ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, and though those are entirely two different things, I don't even use that to justify his behavior if he ever acts out of line towards another person. I try to be a pretty laid-back person, I am relatively understanding, but damn dude, I could not stand those people. The next one is titled Lee's Revenge. Let me preface this by noting that this revenge was not my doing, at least not exactly. It happened back in the 90s when I was in high school and centered around the type of school I attended. So, in case you were not aware, it is very common in agricultural communities to have what are known as farmer schools. That is not a technical term, but more just something easy to define them. The schools are generally organized by the local farmers, and while you still study the various courses needed to get into college, you also study farming technology courses and get credit hours for work study, in other words working on one or more farms. The area I lived in was surrounded by a number of large farms which grew cotton primarily, so during the year we would spend time out in the field both tilling, planting and harvesting. One of the farms near the school was this 1,000-acre spread that, like the others, grew mostly cotton, though sometimes they rotated to soybeans or silage. Basically corn, but you don't harvest it. This farm had a long partnership with the school, so the students provided near free labor for the farmer. The farmer leased this property from some out-of-state owner and paid them a portion of the revenue from the harvest. Imagine my surprise then when I and many of my classmates arrived at the farm to do our work study and the farmer instructed some to crew the sprayers and start spraying herbicide on the fields, while others, myself included, were to take tractors and discs and plow everything under. The farmer wanted every square inch of the fields returned to just dirt. We were shocked to say the least, but after some discussion we set to work. It took us the better part of a weekend to do so, and then we were done. The field was in a beautiful, if barren, state. The farmer thanked each of us personally and paid us about $500 each, quite the sum for a 90s high school senior. We returned to the school, told our headmaster that the contract was completed, and he informed us that the farmer would no longer be working with the school and we would be sent to one of the other larger farms for the rest of the year and our work study. It was probably 2 or 3 months later before word started going around about why he had been instructed to destroy the crop. Granted, these were just rumors, but based on how things turned out for the farmer, I suspect there's some truth to it. So apparently the landowner had decided that he was not going to renew the lease the farmer had on the land. This lease renewal just so happened to fall a few weeks before harvest season would start. Given that the average cotton farm earns about $1,500 per acre, a 1,000-acre farm would easily net the owner $1.5 million. About $500K of that being pure profit. I don't know what the farmer's lease was, but it stands to reason that it was not anywhere near that. So this landowner had figured out a neat little trick. Let the farmer get a good crop planted and then refuse to renew the lease. The farmer would leave the plants in the field and the landowner would just need to pay some contractors to come harvest it and they would earn a profit. Since at the time the farmer's lease was not yet up, he decided to prevent that from happening. His act of revenge against the owner was to prevent them from cashing in on their hard work. Sure, it destroyed his farm and he had to sell off almost everything he owned to buy some property for himself, but he had proved a point. The owner did try to sue the farmer, though he, the owner, really did not have a leg to stand on, or so I was told. I think the court ruled that since the farmer was still under the lease when he had the land tilled under, then it was his property to do with as he wished, and thus the landowner could not tell him what to do with his property. I learned a rather valuable lesson from that man beyond what I learned about farming. That lesson was, never ever cross someone with nothing to lose. Edit, since it was brought up in the comments, let me add some details here. Cotton is one of the few crops which leaves a negative nutrient value in the soil, meaning that after harvest, even if you till the dead plants under, or even if you till them prior to harvest, you won't have as much nutrients as you started with. That is why farmers will plant another crop, usually winter wheat, in place and then till it under rather than harvesting it. This is something commonly called a green manure, but it works to put nutrients that the cotton pulled out of the soil back into it. While the ground would not have been completely dead or sterile, any crop planted on that tract of land without further treatment of the soil would not have produced the same acre per acre yield that a comparable crop would have had he gone to harvest and planted the secondary crop. Which means that the landowner would either have to plant the green manure and spend money that way, or pay by the ton to use artificial fertilizer. And the next one is titled Racist Douche Landlord Gets a Surprise. In the early to mid 2000s, I went to college in a small rural Ohio town. I wanted to get out of the dorms, so I went searching for a place to rent and came upon a small one-story prefab house, think double wide trailer on a concrete slab. It was clean, but it was old and hadn't aged well. The landlord was not mean, but he was cheap. Fixes to the house took forever, and he only used old crap he found in his barn. For example, the sprayer for the kitchen sink broke. It took him 2 weeks of searching to find a used one covered in dirt and spider webs to install. Another time I lost my house key. The lock was so old the local hardware store could not make a new key, and the locksmith suggested we simply replace the lock. It took the landlord the better part of a month to replace the lock with, yet again, another used part from his barn, during which time I had to petition my roommates to let me in. It was a pain, but again, the guy was not malicious, so I dealt with it. The house had serious plumbing issues. All of the drain pipes were cast iron and went through the slab, meaning they were jammed with rust and inaccessible. At first this was only a minor inconvenience. The shower and kitchen sink drained slow. When this happened, the landlord would show up with a snake and try to clear the rust with limited results. Several months into the lease, it got so bad that the shower would not drain at all and raw sewage backed up in the laundry room sink. We desperately called the landlord. It took 2 days to get a hold of him, at which time he said, can't you wait for a few weeks when my plumber friend can take a look at it? No, we cannot. He finally caved and called an actual plumber. The final bill was over $1,000. This landlord owned several houses close together. One of them went up for rent, and a buddy of mine who happened to be Latino wanted to rent it. The landlord took one look at him and said it had already been rented, which it hadn't. It sat on the market for another few months before he rented it to a white couple. Around this time I was getting my hair cut and making small talk with the stylist. We were chatting and I casually mentioned where I lived, and she said, "Wait, is racist douche landlord your landlord? That guy is a Klansman. He tried to get my sister, the local seamstress, to sew a patch on this white sheet and she refused." Now it made sense. I was pissed. The petty revenge. On the last day of my move out at the end of my lease, I had to clean the fridge out. I opened the hatch to the attic and disposed of all of the food in the fridge, making sure to open the Tupperware containers full of leftovers, gallon of milk, vegetables and half-eaten rotisserie chicken. I threw it as far as I could into the back of the attic, and then I closed the hatch and finished moving out. He ended up keeping my deposit for other reasons, but I was not upset. I never found out what came of the rotting food in the attic, but I'm sure he had fun playing What Is That Smell? Edit number 2. As far as the racism thing, we had no definitive proof that is why my friend got turned down. I'm sure we could have done something, but honestly, we were just dumb college students. As far as me inadvertently effing over the next tenant, just stop. I was friends with the neighbor and it was vacant for over a month after I moved out. Would you rent a place that smelled terrible? No single mothers were harmed in this petty revenge. Dear Ripe Stars, today someone wanted to sleep here. And yeah, I know that some of you said that I should put a blanket or something inside, but when I put a little blanket inside there, she does not want to sleep there. I guess it's like too small for her or something. And yeah, unfortunately I have to wake her up because we will bring her to the vet for some checkups. Right, Disney? First boop boop. Boop boop. She's so tired. A little afternoon nap as usual, right, Disney? Disney need to wake up to go to the vet. But I think someone does not want to wake up. Or someone want to wake up? I think someone doesn't want to wake up. Maybe we will go a few minutes later or something, I'm not sure. She's just so cute. Okay, then you just continue sleeping, I guess. If you don't want to go. Right? Or you want to say hello to the YouTube audience? No, someone wants to sleep. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Disney, as I said, we will take her to the vet today. And yeah, I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.